store app. So see where they have it. So the people use post on there. So
good idea.
hello, Mark. Should I start? You mute yourself. We cannot hear you.
Yeah. Yep. Helps if you can hear me, huh?
Now
Seth, you
I
jumped
can.
over here in a hurry.
Yeah,
Fancy
I'm always
seeing
in a
you.
hurry. You know, Dean knows that.
Imagine
I'm always
that.
in a hurry.
We were just over on the creative conversations from noon to one session. So from one session right to the next.
Yes, this
And it was
morning I
already
need to
open in
mute the
Teams.
students, so I cannot go on that meeting. So
Awesome. All right. So
okay.
today we're going to continue our discussion or start a new discussion, Lunch and Learns, with Sophie leading the way and talking about your reflective journaling and what you're doing with students there. So I'm going to get out of the way and give you as much time as we possibly can. So Sophie, take it away with reflective journaling.
Okay, I just directly start to share my screen.
Uh-huh.
So anybody let me know if you can see my screen.
We got you. Looks great.
Thank you. So anyway, so I'm not going to slideshow, just the PowerPoint. But anyway, so I only can see you. Okay, Mark. If anything wrong, please let me know. Okay.
All right.
So this one, I have this theory for a while, but you know what? I implanted in my teaching for several semesters already. Okay. So the purpose of this reflective journaling is actually basically overlapped with our back design and evidence-based course development. It makes sense. So their concepts are similar. So we use this one talking about the actually not only our science field can use it. I think any of the teaching field can use this method. Okay, so we're just talking about is very important is provide the evidence for future you develop your course. That makes sense. Okay, so before the course start, we usually have basically we have some of the topics I want students have in their mind and as faculty also have in mind. However, these topics have to be evidence-based. So before the class start, we're doing the certain of the research. For my students, they have to review my PowerPoint to get this idea. You know, what you want to write down on your pre-lecture journals, okay? While class is doing that, we have the formal or informal assessments, okay? And the class activities, you can be flip the classroom as well. Okay, and at the same time, we ask the students of the reflections of the what they write down on the pre-journals. So I will give them examples pretty soon. After the class, so we're doing more of the assessment to evaluate the students, see what did they write down on the pre-journal? Did they get the understanding on the after class journal? Do they write down the exactly answers for that questions, or they have the new questions? So that is after class what they need to do. So however, this one is evidence-based course development theory. However, I use this as a guideline to generate this reflective journaling for both my students as me. So at the beginning, you identify the problem or issues. So which means on my students, okay, so each of the class, they have unique of the contents to deliver. So I usually let them, because due to the pandemic, I have all my lecture recorded and posted online. So anyway, so all my students can or have to, I should say force them, have to pre-listen my recorded lecture. So they found at least three of the topics you are not very clear, or you are interested to know better, to know more. Okay, then they set up the criteria. So basically they want to know more, or how much more they want to know. Then anyway, so at this point in the classroom, they can use this in the one lecture. So they can find the answers or how much they know from my lecturing. Okay. Anyway, so after that class, they started to do what? They start writing their post journals, and they find out do I fully understand these topics I addressed or identified earlier, or I still have some confusions? Okay, so then they maybe change the next time. Change of what? Of their learning. So from that is from students' point of view. This reflective journal also apply to the faculty. So I do my pre-journal and post-journal as well. So I did go through the same process, find the most of the concept I want to address in the certain of the contents. Then I evaluated the students, collect the data from the pre and the intro lecturing in the classroom and post lecturing too. Then I change next time. If the students most have the question on certain of the contents, which means next time when I lecture same of the contents, I need to address more details. I maybe spend more time. I maybe give more of the activities for the students. So changing of what? My assessment, change my teaching. Okay, so eventually meet my outcomes. Okay. So anyway, so this one is talking about the, actually those are dry words, okay, generally used for academic field, not only for my science course, you can use for any of your classes. I just said that, okay. So this one can help, actually outcome for this one is doing what? They can help students doing the self-reflections and deepen their understandings, and also help them to develop critical thinking skills, okay. So anyway, so this one is talking about the learning outcome of my students. They appreciate much more than I expected, actually. Okay. So what we do exactly for the students? Okay. So I really want students to do the pre-journaling. Last semester, I used for my AP2, basically anatomy physiology 2 class. So I used one of the chapters, okay, so that one is pretty difficult, okay, so pretty important during the pandemic too, is the lymphatic and immune system, okay, makes sense. So we have a lot of concept involved with COVID. So however, before the class, I asked the students to write down 3 of the main topics you want to learn, and you want to learn more from this class, okay? And what I most like about this lessons, you can write down that after the journal. You can write down that portion after on the post journal. However, what I don't like these lessons because why you can write down on the post journal. However, the major things on the pre-journal are 3 of the main things you like. You like to know or you like to know more. And during the lecture, they take the notes. Okay, take the notes. However, the post journal, I tell them, you can answer those 3 questions. Okay, so what do you learn from these 3 major topics after the lecture? Or you can write down the things you like most or you don't like most about these lessons to help me to change in the future my teaching styles. And also I tell them, if you don't have the answers for these 3 topics you picked up, what you should do next, I asked them in the classroom. They said, okay, I will email you. I said, I appreciate that learning attitude that you're supposed to do. Email me, then I will clarify all those concepts with you. What if you know all these 3 topics? What you can do next steps? Maybe during my lecture, I deliver more of the new concepts. They never heard about that. They didn't put in their pre-journaling. So they said, oh, I want to know more about the substance, the concept, or the new concept you mentioned in the lecture. I usually always give some of interesting stories during my lecturing. Most of them are clinical stories. So after they listen it, they usually have more of the interesting things they want to know more. So I said you also can write down on your post-journaling. Okay, so the post-journaling is not only help the students to have a deeper understanding and help them develop the critical thinking skills, but mostly help me. So next time when I lecture the same contents, I know what I talked more, what I shouldn't talk more. And that makes sense. So that is the students' most disliked portion. Okay. For faculty wise, I just write down the pre-journaling on myself, on this concept. What the first things, what did we not covered that I expect we should? That makes sense. So I write down on my own on the pre as well, pre and post. I compare those. What topic most the students have questions? Okay, that's pre generally is from my previous experience. Post generally is from this section. I write down pre and post on myself too. So what topics most students have a deeper understanding from my previous experience that I put on the pre-journals and post-journals, I said in this section, what the students have a deeper understanding. This deeper understanding maybe come from the students preview the contents or come from my lecturing. So I do differentiate these two of the concepts as well. So next time, if I lecture the same of the contents, so I know what I should emphasize on. So that is for me, faculty. Okay. So back to this of the one of the reflection cycles. We try to do what we record what would happen. We do have new actions. This is the pre and post journaling. Can start with new actions and recorded what happened and reflect what we think and analyze that. Then we get new actions, like what I said. Sometimes I consistently changing my teaching styles, changing what I emphasize on, based on what each group of the students are different. It makes sense? And we have different issues to address. Pre-pandemic, I mostly addressed the concept on the cardiovascular disease, on the cancers. Those are big things that I'm focused a lot. However, after the pandemic happened, I addressed a lot on the infectious disease. That makes sense. So we have to adapt. However, our textbook was way behind. A lot of treatment, even the drugs, such as the drugs to treat for COVID now, I do lecture to the students because as soon as they were on the floors, they will encounter those experimental drugs we use and some of the approach like monoclonal antibodies use right away. So I do lecture those parts. So use those students reflecting and myself reflecting, I can have the new actions on each of the group. I don't know in the future what happened. I hope pandemic is the very last things in my life encountered in the medical field. Okay. So I don't want to have more things happen. But like I said, you tell the students, a lot of people don't care. They get the COVID, right? Okay. So I think the education, most of the lecturing gives to the publics or to the students or to the community said you shouldn't get the COVID because, even though you can recover, you affect the people, immunocompromised, those people, they will affect them. However, I give another totally different view for the students is you can get the COVID, however you recovered. Those are the virus use your body as incubator to mutate it, to generate new variants. That is irresponsibility. If entire of the world, the population don't get COVID, that COVID nowhere to be mutated. That makes sense. Okay, so that is the point of the view I want students to have. However, this is reflections we did talking about. I want students to think what I said in the classroom. Of course, not always on the textbook, not always on the internet either. It makes sense. So I want students to have critical thinking, then have the new actions. Okay, this not only we are not only teaching the students of the contents, most of them we teach them the learning styles and to be a lifelong learners, how to learn, and interesting to learn. It makes sense. We teach their learning skills. Okay. So some of the examples I pull out from the students, this is from the students I was talking about the pre-listening and the pre-generating and the post-generating. Okay, so this is from the same students. This is very long actually. So, but I would like to show the students right here, show the audience right here actually. After the pre-generating, they already listened my recorded lecture. So that is the first step they have to do. Okay, otherwise they have no idea what I'm going to cover in next sections. Okay, So they still have a little bit of confusions right here, even though they listen to the lecture, they should, they have unsure about that T cells, what do they do? What is the immature T cells? Okay, especially. Okay, so she has some of confusion. And she also interested in learn something more. So that means she has understanding on it, but she want to learn more. However, the post-reflective journal, she did reflect, she learned something, help her understanding, deeper understanding. She addressed right here. And she put some more information right there. She learned something more after the lecture. Okay. So anyway, so she said the talking about some of the learning styles fit for her, help her in this lecture as well. So I appreciate that. So give me some idea I can give to the next group or this group of the students what you should do. Okay. However, I do have another examples. This one is the students have the totally understanding of her pre-journal concept, but she has more questions about the post-journal. So she lists 3 of the things for me to answer. Actually, this is the pre-question. She already have the clear understanding and deeper understanding it, and she posted the 3 questions for me after the lecture. I really appreciate these students' effort in learning. Okay, so I did, because this is assignments on the Brightspace, so I replied my answers and below. Okay, I tell them, you can ask me any of the questions in the post journal as well. So this one is another example what I use for the pre and post journal. So this one is my journaling, is just the outline. It's outline. Because this one I didn't mention, I use this AP concept. I pick up these chapters because we are trying to implement more of the COVID concept in there. So my pre and post journals involved certain of these concepts as well. Okay, so those are examples. Okay, so again, thank you. This is all my presentation about. So now I stop my presentation and hope you guys have some questions for me.
Sophie, this is April. I have one. What do you suggest if maybe students, maybe more than one, if they have told you that they disliked something because they found it confusing, but then that might indicate that you should spend more time on it? Then what do you do?
Yes, that is the one. We don't left any of the kids behind. If there's a small portion of the students they are interested to learn something, it's not a majority of the students, I tell them to schedule an individual meeting with me. I go through the concept with them individually.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yes, I don't want all the students sit there boring and they don't like these things and I have to lecture to them, make them even boring. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sophie, this is Dean. I'm fascinated with this idea because it creates a repetition for reflection for students and for yourself. Are you doing this at key points of a semester? Are you doing this before and after every lecture? I just want to get a sense of the rhythm of in time.
I use a different class every semester and I pick up different topics. So this semester I use for the SCI 206 Pathofarm for the allied health students. So anyway, so last time I only used for AP students for one of the chapters. However, this time I use for the Pathofarm students, I have 8 of them. So I pick up 8 chapters. Yes.
8 times in the semester that makes sense for you to really dig down and understand. I like that. Okay.
Yes.
Is it ever anonymous? I mean, I was picking up on April, like, if a student dislikes something, there's always like, oh, can I tell my professor that? Like, how do you navigate that?
It's not anonymous. Basically, they have to tell me it's not dislike me, okay? They cannot write down there. They dislike some of the concept, how they delivered. That criticism I can accept. It's not something they dislike me. I don't think it will write down there. But that is constructive suggestions. I tell them, if you don't like this way I deliver the concept, you definitely can tell me on their writings. In that makes sense? So I accept that. So this one is more useful for that evaluations. The students are anonymous. They usually tell you how they dislike that faculty instead of your teaching style or how you deliver the concept, actually.
And one last question, it's fascinating. Are you seeing anything as you reflect as a faculty member? Say you did it in Bio 226, now you're doing it in Science 206. Are you seeing any trends, or as you collect the data even across different courses, about your own teaching or about student performance?
Actually, yes, this collect the data. I'm going to publish it pretty soon. I'm going to write a paper. Actually, different level of the students, their critical thinking skills are different. Such as our allied health students, their associate level. Why let them write down these questions? They usually pretty superficial. They usually ask what it is. So very early level of the critical thinking. Then on the post journal, they most ask, yes, I understand it. I usually let them provide the more rationale. I said at least you provide 2 or 3 sentences why it is yes, why it is no. So it's very superficial. I can understand for them. However, on the start with the nursing students, even though AP2 is a freshman, can be freshman students. So they already have a little bit in depth, like the example I gave to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They write down very detailed, and the students have a new question to ask to me. So my step is next one I use for the patho and farm high levels for 300 levels. I would like to see those students level on the critical thinking level. Okay, so those data could implant to our educated citizen as well.
Thank you.
Okay. More questions? If we don't, I'm leaving the meeting, okay?
Sophie, Marlin here.
Okay.
Appreciate your application of this principle of the value of personal reflection through a learning process. I think it's very important, and it's one reason we've got a long heritage of that kind of approach to learning, that inclusion of reflection at Methodist College, and it certainly is threaded through the educated citizen learnings and reflections. There's a unit 10 of the Thought Patterns for High Performance, the Pacific Institute mindset material that encourages journaling too, for the setting of personal goals and reaching of personal goals as part of the whole final applications of all that material that students get. So very important that, and students probably are not unfamiliar, at least in their later semesters, with being asked to do this kind of thing, and they should find it to be not stretching them too much. I was wondering what kind of points you put on these assignments and how you grade them.
It's so far is 8 points for pre and 8 points for the poster. So I totally have 8 of them. So 16 times 8. So do the math. It's about I should say it's about 10 to 15% of my total overall grades.
Nice.
Okay.
And are these kind of completion grades, or as you were saying that the students sometimes offer pretty superficial questions, and do they get points taken off if their questions are superficial?
Okay, so it depends on our students level. Like our associate students, their learning concept superficial compared to the nursing students. All these students are required to complete these assignments. Okay, so actually on the AP students, I took as bonus, actually for them. In the Mexico, for the nursing students, I usually a little bit different, because they are more, I think, into it in the make sense. I asked them, all the students took this bonus, none of them missed. basically. But for our associate degree students, I make them as required.
Yeah, I think the students probably don't realize the value that they will obtain out of this process from going into it. But once they do it, and you say 8 times, they're saying, wow, I'm really learning this other through this other thread of my interactions with my faculty and other students too, I suppose. Things that I wouldn't have learned if I hadn't engaged in this. And it becomes an intrinsic motivation then to keep digging deeper with their questions and being honest with their questions, doesn't it?
Yes, and I told all my students this approach not only can use in my class, use in any of your class and in your future too. I said I doing this for myself too. Every night I try to write down 3 things I should know for tomorrow. Then I try to write down on my diary, if I reached that goal or I haven't. To be a lifelong learners, yes.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating as a faculty member when whether you're in a classroom or online and you ask, are there any questions? And there's this silence and you wonder, well, surely there are, but putting points on it, giving them bonus points, making it a requirement, that's got to make all the difference.
So that's the reason why I think this one should use for the faculty as well. We encourage use for the faculty. In the next time, we are reflective of self too, so to be a better person in the future. Anyway, so if they don't have questions, I usually tell my students, Seth sit in my class, he might know. I told them, you either know everything or you don't know anything. Either way, you don't have questions. For our faculty, is the same thing. It makes sense. So anyway, if you have no questions, I'm going to leave the meeting, like I said. I don't waste minutes.
So I have a question, Sophie.
Yes.
So have you compared the grades of the topics that you've had reflective journaling from the past semester to previous semesters where you did not have that journaling?
That is of the publication data I'm going to do. Or compare those students' grades too. That is one of objective findings. So because those approach can be subjective findings, you said our students have deeper understanding. How you reflect on the deep understanding on, if you want to publish any data, you have to have objective findings. So grades is one of them. Yeah.
So did they have better grades?
Yes, absolutely. So far, I think, I have to have April help me for the SPSS analyzing on it. But anyway, I will go through the significant P less than 0.5, 0.05. Does that make sense? Yes.
Sophie, I'm really interested in how you're thinking through this and publishing. Because you're publishing it, sort of building off a Seth's question, how are you tracking objectively the data? So when you're reading a post-student reflection, what are you doing with that data to sort of say, yep, this is a significant hit? Or is it based on the quantity of the hits of misunderstanding or deep understanding? Like, what are you doing with that piece? You understand what I'm asking? Like,
how do you
quantify that reflective data?
Yes, it's before I use this journaling, those students aggregated the data. So entire group of the students, they are on this test, on this immune system and the lymphatic system, like this one. I use that, aggregated data compared to post journaling. People use this data. Basically, after the students use this approach, their grades, see if significant change.
So primarily grades, got it.
Yes, aggregated data, I don't need to collect the individual ones, so I don't need to go through IRB too much.
So what Dean said got me thinking, how many students are saying this was the topic that I left the lecture or I left the class period not feeling as prepared as I needed to be? And could you put something like after an exam saying that this journal, like I felt prepared after the lecture, but after the test, I now realized that I was or was not prepared enough?
Okay, that would be good suggestions is post-test reflective journaling. I don't have that portion. I only have post the lecture generally. So post the test, which means the students don't understand that, still don't understand that, they might be, after the text. That will be the good suggestions. Put the third journaling there. Yes, in the future.
And it could be even something that you, like if there are certain questions about a topic, you can ask the students, how did you feel about this? And then correlate it to how many questions they missed on the exam, as opposed to just a reflective, this is how I felt, but numbers wise, this is exactly what I got on the test. This is how I felt before. So put a little bit more.
I think that is applied to my journaling. I think the students think they are posted journaling already have understanding on it, but do not reflect on their grades, which means the next time when I lecture this portion, do I need to go through more details and spend more time on it? That is for me, more than for students. In the make sense, they think they already have understanding and they write down the rationale. But however, I think sometimes it's a testing skills as well. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, it makes sense. So when you're writing the paper, publish it, you have to eliminate that is distract factors because everybody have different testing style. Another one is for that part, I encourage students, I always encourage all my students doing more of the practical question before they go to the test. That is improve your testing skills because they cannot analyze is what is the keywords in the question, what is the keywords in the answer. So they usually just, I look at that, maybe a couple answers correct. That's still your keywords in the question shouldn't be matched the keywords in the question. That is testing skills. Yeah. More questions?
I just have more of a comment. I really like your formalized journaling. I think all of us probably after a lecture reflect a little bit, but it's not a formal, in most cases, or at least not in my case, a formal sit down and really write out what I thought about what was there. I think about how can I improve it for next time, but it seems to end there. I love the formal process, not only for your students, but for you. I think it makes a huge difference in what you're doing.
Yes, you can. Yeah, go ahead.
Go, keep up the great work. Thank you.
No problem. You can make all the faculty attending that create conversation doing their pre and post as well as our Dove credits.
Oh, gee, all the creative conversation folks are going to love you for that one. Now we've got extra things to do.
You will hit me for that one, okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Now we know why we have that in Teams. So everybody put their reflections into Teams now, so we can all see that.
Sophie, this is Lane. I do agree with Mark that you are a good role model for your students. And I think that my students would buy into journaling more if I told them, hey, I'm going to be doing this as well. And we can all compare our answers together.
Yes. And your students from my class is required. It makes sense. So when they go through my class, required to go through this process actually. But it's the points for them. So it's a soft point. So they are pretty glad. They're pretty happy about doing these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the idea. And I think I'll start using it with my students, and be very generous in the first year with trying to help them to develop more of a deeper reflection rather than that surface reflection that you talked about that I see a lot because I do a lot of, asking them about muddiest point and they're very superficial in their muddiest point. Like, I don't understand this whole concept. And that doesn't really help me to know where they need clarification.
Yeah, you know what? This is the first time I use for the SCI 206. That is for your group of students because they have 8 of them. So the first couple I saw is pretty superficial, but I address in the classroom a little bit. I think they're getting much more in depth towards the end. So the first 2 may be a little bit superficial, but towards the 6 and 7, they have more things to write down. So that would help. Just so you address it in the classroom a little bit more. Just said, you know what, I want you guys to have a little bit deeper digestions of your information. It makes sense, your concept. Could you write down like this way? I give some example. One of the students' question I pull out just said, yes, I understand that. How you understand that? So I will give some examples to help them. So in the future, I will give some of the, maybe it's a format template. So like those I put on the PowerPoint could be the good template for the future students, how to write it.
That's great. And I also think it's a useful idea because I do have some students that wanted a deeper discussion than I had the time to give in class. And, you know, I was afraid if we went down that rabbit hole that I would lose most of the class.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of helps to facilitate a deeper discussion with individual students outside of class.
Yes, I
So
agree.
thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Hey,
Thank you.
Sophie, how much of your journaling do you share with your students? Do you share like things that have happened in, like you've written down in your journal, or you just share that you've done it?
I shared the students already passed that semester, basically from previous in the magazine, not from the current group. I usually share from the previous. So there's a couple things that I think involved. The first one is if I share the current students, what they write down, that students know, even anonymous, that student sitting in the class maybe do not feel comfortable. It makes sense. So
Sure.
this is one of the things we do not want to share. You do not share another student's assignments in current to the current. So when they talk about it, they might not feel comfortable. It makes sense. So it's
I
from
meant
practice.
specifically from your own journaling. So Lane was talking about how because you do it as well, it makes them feel the students more comfortable to share that. Do you share any of your journal records, or do you just share that you are doing the journal?
I share I doing the journal, and I usually I tell the students what is the course objectives, and I tell them 3 of the major concept I'm addressed in this chapter. This concept that is my pre-journaling already. It makes sense. I didn't tell them it's my pre-journaling. I said I'm going to address these 3 ones in detail in this section. So I just tell them directly. That is also a match to our course objective for the specific course objectives too. So
okay, thanks.
yes.
Quick question: is your post journal immediately after, say, your lecture? It's not about the win, or is it after you've taken in the body of student post reflections that you modify? I was just thinking about how I might look at that differently. You know, I finished my lecture and I want to address, maybe I did this well, maybe I didn't do this. But after I read student ones, that would maybe give me more information.
It's after reading the students ones.
Oh,
yes,
gotcha.
I have to, after read all of those information, then I can make the new actions. So
gotcha.
That is the next the pre-journal I will have to do. Yes, it's after read the students, all the concept from students, and I analyzing it.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, it's a Friday. Should we go, Mark? Should we go?
I think you think you're going to jet out of here early on us, huh? Yeah.
Yes.
I think you did a fantastic job. It really helps me understand a lot of what you're doing more formally. Like I said, a lot of us, I think, do it informally, but that more formal process really is a powerful piece. And I think if more of us can do that, we'd be in great shape. So keep up the fantastic work, and thank you for sharing with us.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Nice
you.
job.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks, Sophie.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.